All right, if you've been tuning in to Washington Watch over the past 2 weeks, you know that we have devoted a special segment each day during the Olympics to highlight the human rights abuses of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, we're moving on from the Olympics, but I'm not moving on from what China is doing. Now, we know that CCP, that the Chinese Communist Party, that we know they're bad actors, but have political and business leaders here in the West been empowering the Chinese Communist Party to do what they're doing? Joining me now to talk about this is Peter Schweizer. He's the author of Red Handed: How American Elites Get Rich Helping China Win. Peter, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Great to be with you, Tony. Thanks for having me.
First, and I've got several questions, so I appreciate you coming back on. I've read your book from cover to cover. I find it fascinating. Look, I thought I knew a lot about China, serving on the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. I've tracked a lot. I've been sanctioned by China. But you helped connect a lot of the dots, and it was alarming to see the political and business leaders in the West that have really made China what it is today.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They basically have struck a bargain with Beijing, the Chinese Communist Party, where they have helped them grow, helped them become more powerful. And that power, of course, is going to be aimed at the United States, while at the same time, Beijing has made them very, very wealthy. China has a strategy. It's called elite capture. And it's very simple, Tony. Rather than go toe-to-toe with the United States, deal with our world-class military, deal with our vibrant economy, they're going to effectively decapitate us by buying off our political leadership. And they've had a lot of success in doing this with people in both political parties.
Yes, and that's something to underscore here. It's both political parties, it's Democrat and Republican, but we've had people in very high positions, in very sensitive positions, and I have a little knowledge of that in the information that you have when you're in government. And it's hard not to think, and I know that if you have a security classification and you cannot share certain information. However, it appears to me that the Chinese know, individuals who know what's going on in the American government, that they're leveraging that. Even if they're not getting classified information from them, they're gaining information on how our government works and what its priorities are.
Yeah, there's a couple of things they want. They certainly want information. They want insight. But they also want basically the policies that are in place to remain in place because they're highly beneficial to Beijing. The Chinese strategy, loosely translated to English, is they want big help with a little bad mouth. And what that means is they understand that political leaders may have to, ding Beijing for human rights abuses or for their treatment of the Uyghurs. They're not concerned about that. What they want is help on the big issues that are going to help them defeat the United States in this race or this war that they're having with us. And that is, they want unfettered access basically to our capital markets, which is Wall Street. They want unfettered access to our technology, which is basically Silicon Valley. And they want free and open trade. And if they get those three things, they are highly confident they will beat us. And they are right. Because we have a situation right now where our best and brightest companies, Google and Microsoft, for example, are subsidizing artificial intelligence research being done at laboratories in China that are linked to the Chinese military. So they're literally aiding and abetting our military rival in the technology race. With that kind of help, they're probably going to win.
Well, Peter, I want to get into some specifics. Just recently, and this was since you were on the program last, the present director of the FBI said that as he looked into what was happening with China, that he was shocked by the level of the security threats by China and the amount of spying that China is doing. Now, he says that, but yet we've had previous FBI directors that had worked for companies, businesses affiliated with China. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. And that's part of the problem. You have people that serve in government, former members of Congress, former senators that leave. And what do? They become lobbyists for Chinese military or intelligence linked companies. They're getting paid in some cases $1 million a year helping these military companies lobby in Washington, D.C. But you also have, former assistant directors of the CIA, former military officers, former secretaries of defense that become lobbyists for Chinese state-owned companies, or they help Chinese state-owned companies competing against American firms around the world. We have this lack of character and this lack of moral guidance among a lot of people that lead this country. Public service for them lasts very briefly, and then they spend a lifetime cashing in. It's one thing if you cash in, I mean, this is bad enough. If you cash in for some crony deal back in some congressional district, it's something of a magnitude of order more of a problem when you're doing it with our chief rival. And a lot of them are cashing in by doing sweetheart deals and aiding and abetting Beijing in their competition with us.
I mean, this is alarming when you look at people you had Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, you had people at every level of government that have, maybe not directly, but they're working with a finance company, or they're working with some consultant working with China, but the money is coming from China. And some of these know this in advance of them leaving government service, that they're going to take these positions. It was shocking for me to see this, that you have people who are serving this country, and I put that in quotes, then going to work for one of our chief rivals. I mean, I would think that you should choose. You can either serve our country in a sensitive position and be entrusted with information that the average American does not have, or you can work for our rival, but you can't do both.
Yeah, I choose. It's a pretty simple solution. By the way, try doing that in China. Try serving in a senior position in the CCP and then suddenly switching sides to do something to benefit the United States. No, it's terrible. It's sort of masked in a way to make it acceptable, but it's appalling. One of the examples I have in the book is former Speaker of the House John Boehner. He goes to work for a lobbying firm in Washington, D.C. He will say he's not a lobbyist. He is a senior international consultant for this lobbying firm. But when you look at this lobbying firm, one of their longtime clients is the actual Chinese government. And this lobbying firm, among other things, collects political intelligence on the U.S. defense budget. And some of the senior partners in this lobbying firm, because they have offices in China, are senior members of the Chinese Communist Party going to the highest level. So these are people that are in the same firm that he is in. He had to know that going in. He just made a calculated decision, or he convinced himself that this is not a big deal. Well, it is a big deal. It is a problem. It reflects the corrosive nature of corruption in Washington, D.C., and it needs to change.
Well, as the former Speaker of the House, he would have a top-level clearance and have information that would show just how serious this threat is from China. Now, your book, Red-Handed, is out there. It's it's everything in there is footnoted. It's documented. Have there been those that have tried to keep you from putting this information out there?
Not that I know of. The mainstream media, of course, has ignored it. And if you look at a lot of the parent companies, the mainstream media outfits, they're all aggressively pursuing deals in China. They don't want to do hard stories on China. I think the big tech giants, there's probably some censorship going on. Of course, I highlight, Facebook and Google and the things that they're doing in China. But look, the bottom line is the book is resonating with people. It's been #1 on the New York Times bestseller list for the first 3 weeks it's been out. That reflects not some great work on my part. It reflects the real hunger that average Americans have for this kind of information, because they know there are things amiss going on in Washington, D.C., and this explains part of why it's going on.
Well, it's absolutely wrong. And I've already had some conversations since reading the book with various members of Congress. I know it'd be an uphill battle, but really, I think if you hold a sensitive position in government, you should not be able to work for one of our rivals. I know there's some constitutional issues there, but look, choose. You can't work for both. I think what you gain by working in some of these sensitive positions, again, it's a public trust. You have security clearances, you get information, and it's a part of now who you are, and you operate a certain way based upon that information, and it should not benefit our adversaries in any form or fashion. Peter, before we run out of time, I want to go to the north for just a moment, because we've been talking a lot this week about the Prime Minister of Canada. And you write about him in his book, in your book, because he was asked a question about what administration he most admired, and Justin Trudeau's response was China. Tell us about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty stunning. I mean, he was a member of parliament in 2012. And of course, the Trudeau family has longtime commercial ties with Beijing and the Chinese Communist Party going back to Justin Trudeau's father. His brother certainly has his relationships, and Justin Trudeau does as well. But he was asked in 2012 what foreign government he admired the most, and he mentioned China. And he explicitly said, I like their basic dictatorship. That was his word, because they just get things done so efficiently. Well, of course, dictatorships have the benefit of not worrying about civil rights or property rights or an independent judiciary, but it really opens the window to the soul of this man and what he really thinks the role of government is. I think part of that is because of the history the family has with China, but part of it is his view of power. And it's very frightening, because events that you're seeing in Canada mimic in some very significant ways the manner in which the Chinese government treats its own people.
But Peter, you write about in your book, this is not just a casual relationship. There has been some direct benefit that in some ways you could say his political success has been tied to this relationship with China.
Yeah, there's been a flow of political money from Chinese businessmen in Canada who are linked to the CCP or are linked to Chinese Communist Party front groups. We know that the family has personally benefited. His memoirs were actually published in China. We don't know how much the Chinese Communist Party propaganda department paid him, but they bought the Chinese right to his books. And interestingly, when they bought those rights, Trudeau did not share that he had sold those rights with his own advisors. In fact, one of his advisors was the head of the Canadian spy agency. And when he discovered after the fact that Justin Trudeau had taken money from the Chinese government, he was appalled, as he should have been. So it's not just a question of making money. His brothers made money. His father made money. The family's political fortunes and financial fortunes are really linked to this tie to Beijing. It's the fact that he has tried to cover it up. He's not been honest with the Canadian people. And I think it's starting to show exactly the manner in which he views government and how it should function. And again, it mimics in very significant ways the way that China operates towards its own people.
Well, and Peter, if I'm not mistaken, from your book, that this influences policies as well, as he's attempted to set up an institute connected with China, and had not the Canadian people pushed back on it, he would have accomplished that.
Yeah, there's a whole series of things he's done as prime minister. There's a very real concern in China because of the size of the country relative to China. The Chinese are buying up strategic companies and industries, some that are military related, some related to the minerals industry. And those have been the subject of a lot of debate by both the Conservative Party there and the Liberal Party. Justin Trudeau has very aggressively backed Chinese efforts to buy critical industries in China. He doesn't view it as a threat. He doesn't view it as a problem. He appointed a foreign minister who, it turned out, had multi-million-dollar loans that he had taken out from the Bank of China for property that he owned in London. There is a very deep and abiding problem with the political class in Canada. And because Canada is such a small country in terms of population relative to China and relative to the United States, their problems are magnified. And Justin Trudeau continues, I would argue, to do the bidding for Beijing, not perfectly. Remember, as I said, big help with a little bad mouth. Right. So there is a little bad mouth, but most of it is the big help that China really wants.
Yeah, I think that's important to note, because you'll hear politicians say, oh, China's bad on human rights, but it's a passing note. But what you don't see is what they're doing to help them and facilitate the economic growth and the free ride that China is getting when it comes to the human rights abuses. Peter, final question for you, as we're just about out of time. Back here in the United States, what do Americans who care about freedom and care about these things and are principled and love this country and are not willing to sell it out for a few pieces of silver. What do they need to be doing?
Well, first thing I would say is don't buy Chinese products, because the vast majority of Chinese companies that are selling products here are linked to the Chinese military industrial complex. So as they profit, you are financing the Chinese war machine. Second thing is look at your investments. I certainly didn't buy individual Chinese stocks, but when I looked at some of the mutual funds in my IRA, some of them were developing world or Asian mutual funds. You find that 30 or 40% of the companies in that mutual fund are actually Chinese companies, some of them linked to the military. So look at your investment portfolio and sell out in any investments you have that are aiding, abetting Beijing. And then I propose a series of other reforms we need to take as a country in the book. But let your elected officials know you're going to vote on these issues, that
Yes.
it's important to you. Ultimately, it's about electing people of good character who recognize the Chinese threat, who recognize the fundamental nature of the Beijing regime that's willing to destroy its own people. Is going to do the same thing to us if we give them the opportunity. So let your elected officials know you care about this. This is an important issue to you.
It absolutely is. Peter, we're out of time. Thanks so much for joining us. Great book. Folks, I encourage you to pick up a copy of it and do just as Peter said.